The Native American Community Clinic is now administering the updated Pfizer bivalent booster. The updated bivalent booster helps protect against the original COVID-19 strain and against newer Omicron variants. And it will help restore protection that has decreased since previous vaccinations. People age 5 and older are now recommended to get an updated bivalent booster dose at least 2 months after their last COVID-19 shot. That means the bivalent booster may be given after a person's primary series or after their last booster shot, regardless of what brand you received before. Even if you've already had COVID-19, you should get vaccinated. Right now, at the Native American Community Clinic, you can get COVID-19 vaccines, including updated boosters, at the same visit as other vaccines. However, if you've received a recent monkeypox vaccine, you may need to wait 4 weeks before you can get a COVID-19 vaccine, and you should discuss this with your provider. Schedule your vaccination appointment with the Native American Community Clinic by calling 612-872-8086.
Hey, Cudahy to all my friends and relatives in 4 directions. This is Robert Pilot of Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake. I'm here to ask you for your support. Finding honest Native-centered news is not easy. But with your support, we're able to provide accurate information about Standing Rock, Line 3, treaty violations, and COVID-19 in our Native communities. Please visit Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon and donate if you can. That's Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon. Pinigigi, and thank you for your support.
Minnesota has the only original wolf population in the continental United States, and 80% of Minnesotans believe the wolf should be protected. Howling for Wolves is asking Minnesotans to respect our true wildlife manager, the wolf. Their survival is critical to our ecosystems, our communities, and even our economy. As highly intelligent animals with strong social bonds, Minnesota wolves deserve to be protected and admired. Learn more at howlingforwolves.org. Let's live and let howl.
Hey, Ogimaa, I've been hearing a lot about this term, climate justice. What is that?
Climate justice is recognizing that the negative impacts of climate change don't affect all people equally. It also means transitioning from a fossil fuel-based economy to a more sustainable future. MN350 is one of the groups that's pushing for this transition to protect our futures. You can even get involved too.
That's great, especially since I'm concerned about pipeline projects like Line 3. How can I help MN350?
Just find them on Facebook or visit mn350.org.
With a look at your AM 950 weather, I'm Patrick Lilia. Partly cloudy tonight with a low of 13, then clearing skies on Wednesday with a high of 19. Cafe Latte is unlike any restaurant you've ever experienced. Grab a tray and pick from their award-winning selections of soups, salads, sandwiches, and mouth-watering desserts. Cafe Latte, Victoria Street and Grand Avenue in St. Paul, or cafelatte.com.
Portions of Native Roots Radio may be pre-recorded.
It's a good day to be indigenous.
Get up, stand up.
They are going to become more brutal.
Because all the hippies are trying to be Indians anyway.
They're going to become more repressive because it's a matter of dollars and their illusionary concepts of power.
Hey, Victor.
We must live in balance with the earth.
And also with recent happenings that wounded me.
I am awake. Welcome to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Wakanja Hade. Hey, Cudahy to all my friends and relatives in 4 directions. You are listening to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Robert Pilot. We discuss local and national Native news and events. And as you know, Ogimaa, Native issues are human issues, and human issues are Native issues. Hey, we talk about the news that you don't hear anywhere else here on Native Roots Radio, and I want to hand it over to Ogimaa right now. And then after that, we're going to have Nancy Beaulieu of MN350. So welcome again, Ogimaa.
Bonjour, Ani and relatives. This is Ogimaa Giniw Ikwe from Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake. We're a Native-led show. We talk about Native issues, environmental issues, and human issues Monday through Friday from 6 to 7 p.m. Central on the Civic Media Network. What we don't talk about every day is something called a land acknowledgement. And I would like to take a moment to read a land acknowledgement that was graciously provided to us by Miss Nancy Beaulieu of MN350. We respectfully acknowledge that we live on the land of the Anishinaabe, Lakota, Dakota, and Ho-Chunk nations. They have lived harmoniously with these lands and waters for countless generations before the onslaught of colonization. Like indigenous peoples across the Americas and most of the world, they experienced genocide, ethnic cleansing, theft of their land and waters, and forced removal. Our ability to live, work, and enjoy this area is connected to their profound loss. We ask all in our community, including our governing bodies, to respect and honor tribal sovereignty, our self-determination, and to learn the true history of the lands on which we reside. We resolve to work with them to build a shared, sustainable future for all. Today, I want to talk about the Polymet Mine, also known as the North Met Mine. It's planned for the North Shore of Lake Superior in northern Minnesota. Currently, there's a dispute over the project that has made its way to the Minnesota Supreme Court, where the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is defending its permitting process against allegations that it worked to conceal federal regulators' concerns from the public. What that means is that the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency was required to legally disclose all comments that were made on the project to the public, and they chose not to disclose the comments that they received from the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a federal agency. The EPA said that their permit, as it was written, may violate the Clean Water Act, and the MPCA specifically is accused specifically of withholding those comments from the public. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency issued the first draft of their Clean Water Act permits for the open pit mine, which would extract copper, nickel, cobalt, and other valuable metals back in 2018. But those permits have been in legal battles ever since. We're now in 2022. And that's not just with environmental advocates like Water Legacy, Friends of the Mississippi, and others, but it's also with Native American tribes in the state of Minnesota, because they argue that those permits will not protect the waterways and that the upstream pollution on those would affect and effectively destroy their treaty rights. This issue has been really ongoing, and it really affects the Fond du Lac Lake Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and Water Legacy, as well as Friends of the Boundary Waters and Friends of the Mississippi, have been working really hard to fight this, including taking it to the Supreme Court. The comments from the Environmental Protection Agency were never published, and the state regulator should not have tried to avoid that scrutiny, according to Paula McCabe, who is the attorney for Water Legacy. And as a result of the Freedom of Information Act, they have the documents, and the EPA said the permit would violate the Clean Water Act. She also added that if the MPCA had been forced to respond to the EPA's comments, the petitioners, meaning her and the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and others, may have prevailed to have a stronger permit that protects Minnesotans. They're hoping that President Joe Biden's EPA, the EPA under President Joe Biden, has not been able to make comments on this because it had gone through in 2018. And they're hoping that Joe Biden's EPA will be able to make its own comments as a result of this as well. There's also the other part of the Clean Water Act permits. The other part of this is that the Clean Water Act permits are not the only problems that Polymet has had with this project. The project's permit to mine, which is issued instead by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, is actually awaiting a contested case hearing ordered by the Minnesota Supreme Court in 2021. So the EPA, again, a federal regulator, recommended that the Army Corps of Engineers decline and reissue a federal wetlands destruction permit in May, but the Army Corps has not yet made a decision on that permit. So Polymet is one of two of the very controversial mining projects that are supposed to happen in northern Minnesota. And the other one is known as the Twin Metals Mine, which is near Ely, and it faces opposition from the Biden administration because of its proximity to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. And the Department of the Interior has revoked the leases on that project, which relied on the last days of a prior administration that were, again, reinstated under the Trump administration, but were finally canceled in January of this year. So here at Native Roots Radio, we want to talk about these issues. These issues related to mining are really important, and our water, our wild rice, our treaty rights, all of these things are at stake when we talk about things like these mega companies coming in and creating open pit mines. My understanding with this mining project is that it would create a massive miles-long open pit mine along the northern shore of Minnesota. And from that mine, only like 1% of the materials that they would be extracting from that mine are actually usable. So when we talk about things that are sustainable, that does not sound like a sustainable practice, and that does not sound like something that the state of Minnesota and its waterways, especially so close to Lake Superior, are going to be benefited by really in the long term. What I'm glad to see on this case is so far, I haven't really heard too many arguments about the job creation of the mining. I think that most people in this day and age are starting to realize that working in the mining industry is a dangerous industry and that it damages your health. So that's not currently an argument that I've seen a lot of. I could be wrong on that, though. But I am really grateful to Water Legacy, Friends of the Mississippi, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area, MN 350, Honor the Earth, all of the groups that have been involved in some capacity at some point to help protect Minnesota's waters from Polymet and NorthMet mines, as well as the Twin Metals mine near Ely. And we'll have more information on this just as soon as we can, or maybe perhaps as soon as the decision comes down from the Minnesota Supreme Court on either of those permits. I also wanted to take a moment to just quickly uplift mn350.org, who's a wonderful sponsor of Native Roots Radio. Nancy Beaulieu is on with us today, and Nancy Beaulieu, if you don't know, is a frontline organizer, water defender, and treaty rights activist. And she is a direct recipient of the MN350 Frontline Fund, as well as others. So if you would like to contribute to the frontline work of Indigenous people working to prevent and protect water problems from happening here in Minnesota, go to mn350.org/frontlinefund/direct, or you can go to mn350.org and right on the homepage, it'll tell you how you can give to support the Frontline Fund. If you like what you hear on Native Roots Radio and you appreciate the work that we do ask in the spirit of giving as we come into the holiday season, if you would consider heading over to Native Roots Radio's Patreon at patreon.com/Native Roots Radio Network. Any amount that you could give as either a one-time donation or a recurring donation would go to directly support the work that we do here, reporting on these issues and talking about these issues, getting guests to join us to talk about these issues on Native Roots Radio. Again, that's nativerootsradio.com, or excuse me, that's patreon.com/Native Roots Radio Network. And if you would like to check out more about Native Roots Radio Network, you can find us on nativerootsradionetwork.com. We're also available wherever you get your podcasts, on iTunes, Spotify, and the TuneIn Radio app. So you can tune in to us anytime on those apps. This has been Ogimaa Giniw Ikwe for Native Roots Radio Presents I'm Awake.
Up next, we're going to have Nancy Beaulieu, Ogimaa with MN350. Always a big crowd pleaser, and people love to hear from Nancy.
J&S Bean Factory is a native-owned, community-supported, cozy, artsy coffee shop which offers roasted on-site beans, live music, and baked goods. Relax in the beautiful outside patio. City Pages writes, voted top 10 coffee shops. Tucked into a quiet corner of St. Paul's Highland Park neighborhood, this coffee shop roasts beans on-site from the best coffee-growing countries in the world. Located at 1518 Randolph Avenue, St. Paul. The good stuff.
We are your relatives.
We are your relations.
Brothers,
sisters,
sons,
daughters.
And some of us are your grandchildren.
We are your community. Historically, we held places of honor and respect. Because of the impact of colonization, some of us are rejected, thrown out from family, friends, and community, set up as targets for sexual violence, sex trafficked, humiliated, tortured, and murdered. Everybody has the right to be safe. We are your relatives. Remember,
homophobia is not traditional.
Sponsored by the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition.
As we head towards colder weather, it's important to make sure you're up to date on vaccinations and protected from COVID-19. The Native American Community Clinic is now administering the updated Pfizer bivalent booster. The updated bivalent booster helps protect against the original COVID-19 strain and against newer Omicron variants. And it will help restore protection that has decreased since previous vaccinations. People age 5 and older are now recommended to get an updated bivalent booster dose.
Hey, welcome back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Robert Pilot.
Then after a person's primary series or after their last booster shot, regardless of what brand you received before. Even if you've already had COVID-19, you should get vaccinated. Right now, at the Native American Community Clinic, you can get COVID-19 vaccines, including updated boosters, at the same visit as other vaccines.
Hey, welcome back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Robert Pilot. Hey, we always love to break bread and have a fire around the place here because we have Nancy Beaulieu on today. Nancy's with Bemidji 350 and the mothership MN 350 here in Minnesota, and we love to talk about what's going on. We talk treaties. We talk about the good things that MN 350 is doing, but also we talk about water and protecting Mother Nature. So, Nancy, Pinigigi for being on as always.
Right, and it's always a pleasure to be here again. I'm the Northern Organizer for Minnesota 350. I reside here on the Leech Lake Reservation. This is my homelands, and I just want to give a big shout out to MN 350 for the continued support. And quite honestly, Robert, they let us Native folks here in Indian country define our own work because we know, who our people are, what our communities look like, and what our challenges are, and what are the solutions. And so I want to, remind our listeners and our allies far and wide that, without the support of 350 and all of our listeners and the allies that's been on the front line with us, or just, maybe mailed in some financial support or some type of resource or skill that gave us way, for the path forward to continue to win. We're asking that they continue to support us by donating to Minnesota 350. End of the month last year, we brought in some money for Give to the Max, but the work still continues, and it's not cheap fighting big oil companies, Robert, and some of these politicians. But again, we need support in all kinds of different ways. So just give us a shout out. In other spaces too, some of your friends and relatives who might be able to help, support this work, and the Frontline Fund too, Robert. We need money there, right?
Yeah, definitely. The Frontline Fund does. We talked about this last week, but it's one of the purest forms of giving. I think there's no in between, and there's no really vetting out with 100 people if these people are worthy. It's people are worthy, and you get one person talking about it, and they get some money to help fight for clean water and clean air.
Right. And a lot of these folks on the front line, they're really good-hearted people that do this because it's probably in their DNA. They have good hearts, and they can really use our support. So it's things to help them be able to be there. Maybe might be a car repair, or help with some type of event, or maybe they need some medicine. Just all these little things that seem easy to get, but they're not really that easy to get because again, most of our relatives were struggling, but this is one way that we can, help our Native communities coming out of Native American Heritage Month. That, like I said, Robert, in the last show, giving forward and helping our Native spaces, supporting our businesses. There's so many ways that you can help us forge forward, and that's by giving or showing up. So I encourage, people to go to our website, our Facebook page, and throw us some money, or your love. Sometimes we just need, a sister that knows how to cook, when we're out on the front lines, or just to hold space with us. And, we were just talking about this last week on our way up to Ogimaa on this feed. It was a feed lot taking place in White Earth here. So the good thing is it's kind of on stall for a year. But we were talking about how this front line is so important because it's the people for the people really doing the work, Robert. And that's who's asking for our support more often than not.
That kind of reminds me of maybe we should go back in the time machine, because I get sentimental about this time, because we'll be 6 years in January that Native Roots Radio has been on. But, and we both started a lot of our work during Standing Rock, and I know the show started because of Standing Rock.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because just on my way home from the basketball game, I was talking about this director position with the Minnesota DFL party here in Beltrami County. Today I threw my name in the hat, and it's a big step forward, but I really dialed back on my memory and how did I get to that decision to think that I could really show up somewhere like that. Well, when we went to Standing Rock, it wasn't just the fight for clean water, Robert. I realized it was a fight for our democracy, not as Americans, but as Native people, that, we need to be heard, because we're more often the forgotten people, and our words often fall on deaf ears. So, I think coming home from Standing Rock wasn't, just about clean water. It was about defending our people and reminding them that we were still here and that treaties mattered. So, coming home, I noticed on Facebook there was this DFL, how to be a delegate, and I'm like, I'm curious enough, I'll go check it out. And Robert, let me tell you, it's been such an experience of a lifetime to represent our people in a party that usually doesn't look like us, right? You don't hardly see natives in the DFL.
Right.
And so we kind of stepped out of our own comfort zones. And I remember, I think it was Elizabeth Warren who says, if you're not at the table, you are what's being served.
Yeah.
And Shirley Chisholm said, if there's not a chair at the table, bring a folding chair.
Yeah.
So we kind of weave those together, and we just keep showing up.
Yep.
And back in May of 2022, our good friend Christian Taylor Johnson from Leech Lake went in drag to the DFL convention in Rochester, Minnesota, and we had a treaty resolution in hand. And we spoke for our people and for the treaties, and we got 91% of the DFL delegates to support the treaty resolution.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was, it was one of the most powerful, inspiring weekends of the spaces that we hold. So we didn't go as DFLers, Robert. We went as treaty people within the DFL party. So again, treaties are nonpartisan, regardless of what political party you belong to, what church you go to, how you self-identify. We're all treaty people.
Yeah.
So, I had to make a visit to the Republican office this Robert. But again, they too need to be reminded that we're all treaty people. So, our presence within this party is treaty people. So we're working on a treaty delegation for the DFL State Convention 2020. Going to be in, right?
What year? 2024? You just froze up a second. 2024 you're talking about?
Yeah, the presidential election, the state convention.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal is to rent space and be a treaty delegation at the state convention and be more visible than we have in the past two state conventions. I've been at both of them, but our goal is to build on our delegation from different relatives throughout Minnesota that represent who we are, and be part of that delegation and represent our treaties, because our goal is to move them onto the action, or from the action agenda to the main platform, because treaties are supreme law of the land. So why not?
Exactly. And I remember when treaties came up, not that they've ever gone away, but I remember saying, not me saying, but other people saying, this is a brilliant way to bring up our sovereignty, and what Native Americans need is to talk about these treaties. And I know it's interesting. I'm trying to get Ho-Chunk recognized in Minnesota, and we're one of the 14 tribes that signed the treaty that you speak of. So Ho-Chunk's been here for thousands of years, and it's great to bring up these treaties.
Right. And I think, what excites me the most too is moving some of the pieces of the work that we're doing at Minnesota 350 in regards to our treaties, like the Anishinaabe Treaty Alliance. We're going to come together and educate our people of what those treaties were about and what they were meant for and what they mean to us today. And there's so much to teach. But once we build our own alliance, Robert, we want to reach out to other tribal nations and just build on that, across Turtle Island. But there's so much work to do. But I think, where we're at now, we're in a good spot. We just recently had a court win here in the White Earth Tribal Court back in July. But unfortunately, Robert, our non-native defendants in the Firelight case just heard from the judge last week, and their motion for dismissal was denied. So they're looking forward to moving into trial. So again, there's another place you can support is the Line 3 Legal Defense Fund, because they're going to need continued lawyer support. And again, they're being resilient and courageous by not giving into any of those plea agreements, because Robert, we shouldn't have to make a plea in a treaty case, because treaties are supreme law of the land, and to admit to a crime being committed is accepting this plea agreement. Basically, that's what you're doing. You're admitting that you were unlawful under their court of law. But Robert, this ain't about that. This is about treaty. No. So, our non-native defendants are holding strong, and they're going to take this to trial. So, yeah,
that's awesome. I think it's really important, and it's great to support our allies because they stand with us and behind us. Let's talk more about, the history of Nancy Beaulieu. I think, let's talk a little bit about that the next segment. What do you think?
Sure, why not?
All right. Hey, this is Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm here with Nancy Beaulieu of MN 350. We're talking treaties. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Hey, welcome back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Robert Pilot. This portion is brought to you and supported by MN 350, a grassroots organization fighting for climate justice. And I love that tagline. Well, we're here with Nancy Beaulieu of Bemidji 350 and MN 350, and we speak every Tuesday on things that matter to us here in Minnesota and all across Turtle Island. So welcome back, Nancy.
Well, it's always a great place to be here on Native Roots Radio, and I can't stress it enough, making a call out to all of our relatives that there's, so much more good work to do. And I think, looking, ahead into 2024, Robert, I think, some of the work that I've been doing have actually, kind of paved the way for more of our relatives to come in. And not just the work I do, it's like, all of our sisters and relatives and our allies that are really stepping it up and running for office and defending the things that are important to us. We as a people need to rise, and we need to do that. More importantly, after, we've seen some of these acts of hate, that we're hearing on the news. And it's like, we have to change it by electing officials that, that care about the safety and well-being of all Americans and all people and all living things. So I think, part of my growth at Minnesota 350 and coming out of Standing Rock was to really step out of my comfort zone and learn how to navigate my way through the system that's been designed to hold us back. And so, we need to be in these spaces as much as people want to say, well, this is a colonized space. But in reality, this government adopted our form of government. Yep. We were diplomatic before they all got here.
Yep.
And we were voting before the Europeans showed up. We were just doing it in our own kind of way and our clan systems, but we were diplomatic, and so I think, just again, I don't blame our people for not showing up, because the system has really beaten us down in so many different other ways to hold us back. And, which reminds me, Robert, I want to read this really quick because it means, because I think when we ask people to come forward and hold these spaces with us, we have to remind ourselves, and I have to remind myself more often than not that a lot of our people need healing still. And how would I expect them to show up and, be Ogichida when they're just trying to survive that day?
Yeah.
I think the Ojibwe poem is, a good poem where, reminds us of why we have to learn how to take care of each other in a better way. So I'm just trying to find it here if I can get to it really quick.
Well, while you're doing that, I just want to remind everybody, how Native Americans go about this, and what we learned, and what I've taken with me since the Standing Rock days is that we're prayful, peaceful, and of course treaty people, and that's how we move in every way we can. That's how we move, and that's what I've learned, and it's been a great lesson over the years, Nancy.
Right. And that's exactly how we won our case at on line 3. Again, we reiterated it wasn't a no line 3 protest camp, it was a treaty encampment, and we were exercising our freedom of religion, we were protecting our culture, protecting the sacred, and those rights are protected under the treaty, and those are who we are. That's our culture we're defending, and that's what our ancestors fought for. So I think being peaceful and nonviolent, you can win with love. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and we that was our story at Campfire, like that, standing with our allies, and again, there's two parties to an agreement, and a treaty is an agreement, and so our non-native people are the other treaty people, and we have to remind them that they have an obligation. So I think if we do that with love and continue to do that in peace, people are really catching on and saying, you know what, I think something's good here.
Yeah.
And there is. And so but I think, when I think about our relatives, and sometimes I feel bad because I understand the struggling they're going through, and the day-to-day thing. I was there myself, Robert.
Absolutely. We
Yeah.
all been there to some degree or another, right?
Right. And so I never want to forget about our relatives, and I wanted them to remind them too, but in a good way, that coming into this space is sometimes healing itself. And we've seen that happen at Standing Rock. And, personally too, I think I was missing my purpose in life, Robert. I wasn't grounded with our teachings. I wasn't grounded with my purpose. And because of assimilation, I kind of got lost. And so I think this space that I'm in now, again, I want to thank, Andy Pearson for reaching out to me and dragging me into this kind of work. Because I don't think I'd be here even talking to you right now, Robert, or doing some of the things that I do. And long story short, sometimes being strong and finding your purpose is healing.
Absolutely. Were you able to find that, Nance?
Yeah, so it's the Ojibwe poem, and its grandfather. Look at our brokenness. We know that in all creation, only the human family has strayed away from the sacred way. We know that we are the ones who are divided, and we are the ones who must come back together to walk in the sacred way. Grandfather, Sacred One, teach us love, compassion, and honor, that we may heal the earth and heal each other.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot in this poem here, and what stands out to me the most is that we may heal the earth and heal each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and we are part of the earth. We're part of earth and sky, and as people, we have unique DNA, that most unique DNA than anyone in the world, and we've been here for 10,000 years.
Right, Robert. And we don't have property rights, we have relationship rights. That's who we are as Native peoples. We don't view property as being mine, so we don't have property rights. We have relationship rights, and because we're all related. So I think when we move forward, into the future, when we think about some of these court cases, we're gonna remind the judge that we have relationship rights. We have responsibility to the fish and the ones that fly and swim. we have to protect them too when we have an obligation to them as well, not to just each other as people, or to our bank because we owe for our car and we're obligated to show up. But yeah, so I think, if as Native people, if we can really think about what could make us feel better.
Yeah.
And it's not a 40-hour, pay, capitalistic kind of lifestyle and out shopping. And yeah, that's all good too, Robert. But again, it's also we create too much garbage. And so there's always a better way, Again, back to Christmas gift giving, Robert.
Right.
We got to start doing that different too.
Well, I'm still waiting for a gift from you. So I'm excited to wait for that. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I know how, I always have to sneak one in there. So that'll my surprise. So yeah, I'm just saying, instead of, going out and buying something, you can always give a skill, go cook for someone. Maybe, a handicapped friend that really needs a deep clean in their apartment.
Right.
Those are things that can go a long way. Matter of fact, I'm donating a little bit of time tomorrow to a friend who has a sore back that can't even take care of the litter box.
Yeah.
And
That's
Robert,
community. That's community, Nancy.
but here's the thing, Robert. I always brag that I have 4 cats and no litter box. And guess what I'm going to do tomorrow?
Clean the litter box.
Because I care.
Exactly. Hey, we got a few more minutes here. We got like 2 more minutes here. And I alluded to this before, and I'm wondering if you could just tell in the last couple minutes here of this segment your story from Standing Rock.
Oh, yeah. So I was a nursing student at the time, going for my LPN, and I guess Standing Rock, I was captivated by the courage and the love, and it was just so much. And so I kept watching and kept watching. And next thing you know, one day, Robert, I'm packed and I'm ready to go. And I went. And it was there that I found my own strength. I was 49 years old, headed off to Standing Rock thinking, what could I do? I mean, I'm half broken already. I'm 49. And I wasn't sure, but my heart compelled me to go. And I went. And, that very next morning we were called to the front line, and I was with the Red Lake frontline camp and Ogimaa from Red Lake Nation, Minnesota. I mean, yeah. Anyway, we got called to the front line, and I was kind of shaken and scared going up to the front line and uncertain of what was going to happen. Robert, when I got there and all the strength of everybody else, I realized I didn't even have any fear, Robert. That strength in numbers. When you stand together, you don't stand alone. You become fearless.
Yeah.
And I still think about that moment, and it's like, wow, I don't know if going to Standing Rock I'd even be where I'm at today, because I faced my fear.
Yeah.
A lot of people, because of the uncertainties, they live with fear, and sometimes it holds us back, and that's okay because we're only human. But again, that was stepping out of my comfort zone and saying, if I don't, who will?
Right.
And I think, if we all started thinking that way and started leaning in on each other and building community and helping us heal each other,
Mm-hmm.
And being those pillars of a community is really, what defending our treaties and our way of life looks like. And what excites me too, Robert, is the EPA just announced last week to protect tribal reserved rights and clean, for our clean water and best practices. And that's the huge news. That's a big step forward. And so I think next week we should talk about that a little bit more.
Exactly. Hey, the opposite of fear is faith, and I think that's what you're talking about. When we can, I can't, and as a group and a collective, we can overcome anything, and I think that's a good way to think about it, Nancy. Why don't you can you hold on? We're gonna take another quick break, and then maybe just talk a little bit more and end up the show. What do you say?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, right on. Hey, this is Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm with Nancy Beaulieu of MN350, a grassroots organization fighting for climate justice. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake. And this portion of the show is brought to you by Howling for Wolves, protecting wolves for future generations. Oh, good one, Nancy. And I'm here with Nancy Beaulieu, and she's holding on here for another segment here. And we want to talk a little bit about, her history, but also how it's brought her to where she's at now, and talk a little bit about that, Nancy. Thanks for hanging on again for another segment. Always fun and interesting to talk to you.
Well, right back, Robert, back to my story from Sandy Rock, from the 49-year-old backseat shaking in her shoes. I never imagined, we'd be at the state convention, or I would be on an occupation for 8 days in a ditch camp for another 3 weeks. Never imagined any of that. And I have honestly built relationships with tribal elected officials, Minnesota, elected officials, local. It's again, something we have to do, Robert. At all these places, there's always a table, and most of the time, us everyday people aren't invited to these tables. So I think, moving into a lot of the work I do, it's about building relationships. And so I think, showing up at the DFL has really kind of opened the door to us, what we can do here in northern Minnesota. As we all know, the northern Minnesota tribes are in this congressional district 8, Senate district or 2 thing. And we didn't do very well, Robert, when it came time to vote.
Right. Yeah. And why is that, do you think? Not enough natives voting, or too many Republicans up there? What was one of the problems,
Well, yeah, that's true. There's too many Republicans up here, but I know there's a lot more of us than them. So we have to figure out what went wrong. And I think working in the last 2 elections, I know what went wrong. First and foremost, they want to throw us tons of money just maybe a couple months before elections, say, hey, get out the voters. And it doesn't work that way no more. Treaties do matter. And I think, looking to the last 500 years where our words have been dishonored, the treaties, everything. And so we're in a position where most politicians fail us. Not all, but most party ever really did anything for our people. So it's up to us to assert ourselves into these positions of, colonized framework where we are being heard. And so that's why I think it's important that, not just being on the front line, it's also engaging in local, state, and federal governments, and to remind them that we're still here. So it's about, finding a place at the table, creating legislation, charters, that's on a local matter. But really, I think what I'm after right now is for more local change, because Beltrami County is surrounded by Red Lake, Leech Lake, and the White Earth Nations. And we're not treated very good here. So we're working really hard to change that. But again, it's a matter of stepping it up and coming out of my comfort zone, and running for, positions that I would have normally never done before. This director position at Beltrami County DFL, it's not because I want a title. It's not because I don't have anything better to do. It's because I know in these last 2 elections what went wrong, and this colonized approach to reaching into our communities and building power collectively has to be looked at, and from our lens, and not from a colonized, well, let's hire some non-native canvassers to get out there. We shut the door on them, Robert. We don't want them knocking on our door. And most importantly, when we were up door knocking this last time for midterms, people care about the issues, not so much the candidate.
Mm-hmm.
We're not spending enough time leaning in on these communities, building trust, and there are great candidates out there, but most often than not, our Native people don't even understand these elections off the reservation, the primary, the midterms, the general election, let alone, who are the candidates?
Right.
They
And a
can-
lot of tribes too don't vote in their own tribal election too, a small percentage. So there's apathy. And also I think one of the things too that you do as MN 350 and also you as a person is to follow through not just those 2 months of throwing money at our canvassers and trying to get the vote out for natives, but we keep the politicians in check and we build relations, and if they're not doing what they're doing, I know phone calls work. They listen nationally. If you're calling your uh, senator or calling somebody about something specific, they listen.
Right. I just thought an announcement from the Biden administration, the EPA last week says something that speaks volumes, because it didn't come out of nowhere by itself. It's just so many people across Turtle Island bringing voice to our treaties and the right to clean water. And I think, when we think about holding our local elected officials accountable, but, it's building that relationship and that trust and respecting our differences. But what we really want to work on moving forward into 2024 and beyond is not getting X amount of votes for X candidate. We're trying to build people power, Robert.
Yeah.
To say it's us showing up and making our vote matter and holding these candidates their feet to the fire but there's so much more we could be doing collectively. And I think, if we build power around our treaties, there's so much more we can do moving forward. And I think that's why I continue to do the work that I do, because I've seen so much good progress already. And this is from one small group of people in northern Minnesota, but everyone has their story across Turtle Island. We see the wins happening in so many other places too.
Yeah, and one of the things too, this is the first time in the history of voting that Gen Zers generation outnumbered the old people like me. I'm a boomer, and that's great to hear. So there's people are listening and getting engaged, and I think what you're talking about, getting our relatives engaged up there is a good thing.
Right. And we're actually excited about doing just that and actually leading in. So, some of the communities that we were door knocking into, we told them we'd see them in spring, Robert, because we really do want to see them again. We don't want to wait till November 2024 to see them.
Right.
We wanted to start that now, and we build power by supporting each other and leaning on each other and finding that sense of healing and that sense of purpose. And I think, given these opportunities that are, supported by our allies and 350, because it's where some of the good work happens, and supporting what we do kind of lights our fire, Robert, and it keeps us going. So, again, we're building power, people power.
Absolutely. Hey, let's get the website again, and then let's talk just real quick, and then so people can get going on the Frontline Fund and help out our relatives that are really fighting with you.
Right. You want me to find the link and put it on there, or?
No, just say it.
Oh,
just go to MN350.
Yep. Minnesota MN350.org, or find us on Facebook at MN350. And just help us out any way you can. Every little bit helps, and even a skill or another type of resource, it's all good, Robert. We all give in our own ways.
Right on. Hey, Peony Gigi and Nancy for stopping in and doing the hard work here all over Turtle Island and coming in and firing up the troops, because I know everyone that listens to you every day that you come on, we get so many great comments.
I'm so glad to hear that.
And it's the truth. Hey, if you're listening to this show, you are part of the resistance from Chief Plentycoops. The ground in which we stand on is sacred ground. It is the blood of our ancestors. We need to resist, divest, join a group, or run for office. Again, thank you for Nancy Beaulieu, Ogimaa. We'll be seeing everybody real soon. We'll see you tomorrow. Free Leonard Peltier now.